it's running. This is the one I meant to run. So, the Bible, I've heard of it. Let's go Protestant. I don't remember which one has the reader. Maybe it's the Word English Bible? I can't remember. If it doesn't read it to us, then we'll know it wasn't the right one. But it is... It is Purim as we speak. So I'm going to try and get it to read the Book of Esther to us, and then we can take the trivia with it.
Esther.
Okay, we got the wrong version
Chapter
of the Bible,
1.
apparently.
Xerxes'
title screen.
royal feast.
Start. The Bible, Protestant. Wasn't the King James Version. It must be the American Standard Version. Oh, I had my sound turned off. That's a problem. Let's go back to the title screen. So maybe it was the version that I picked. My bad. Okay, let's try the Word English Bible again. We're not tired.
Esther. Chapter 1.
Yes.
Xerxes' royal feasts. Now it happened in the days of Ahasuerus. This is Ahasuerus, who reigned from India even to Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. That in those days, when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces, being before him. He displayed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. When these days were fulfilled, the king made a 7-day feast for all the people who were present in Shushan the palace, both great and small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were hangings of white, green, and blue material, fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rings, and marble pillars. The couches were of gold and silver, on a pavement of red, white, yellow, and black marble. They gave them drinks in golden vessels of various kinds, including royal wine in abundance, according to the bounty of the king. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory, for so the king had instructed all the officials of his house, that they should do according to every man's pleasure.
Okay.
Also, Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. Queen Vashti's refusal. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the royal crown, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was beautiful. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by the eunuchs. Therefore the king was very angry, and his anger burned in him. Queen Vashti deposed. Then the king said to the wise men, who knew the times, for it was the king's custom to consult those who knew law and judgment, and the next to him were Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia
How come you're
and
not showing
Media,
us the
who
text
saw
you're
the
reading?
king's face, and sat first in the kingdom. What shall we do to the queen Vashti according to law?
Vashti.
Because she has not done the bidding of the king Ahasuerus by the eunuchs. Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen has not done wrong to just the king, but also to all the princes, and to all the people who are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen will become known to all women, causing them to show contempt for their husbands, when it is reported, King Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she didn't come. Today, the princesses of Persia and Media, who have heard of the queen's deed, will tell all the king's princes. This will cause much contempt and wrath. If it please the king, let a royal commandment go from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it cannot be altered, that Vashti may never again come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate to another who is better than she. When the king's decree, which he shall make, is published throughout all his kingdom, for it is great, all the wives will give their husbands honor, both great and small. This advice pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to its writing, and to every people in their language, that every man should rule his own house, speaking in the language of his own people.
Is that it? I'm pretty sure that's not the whole book. So which chapters did you read? Because I can't tell what chapters you read, since you didn't show me the text.
Chapter 3. Haman plots against the Jews.
You're supposed to cough when you say the name of the bad guy.
After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. All the king's servants who were in the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai didn't bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were in the king's gate said to Mordecai, Why do you disobey the king's commandment? Now it came to pass, when they spoke daily to him, and he didn't listen to them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's reason would stand. For he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai didn't bow down, nor pay him homage, Haman was full of wrath. But he scorned the thought of laying hands on Mordecai alone, for they had made known to him Mordecai's people. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even Mordecai's people. In the first month, which is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pure, that is, the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, and chose the 12th month, which is the month Adar. Haman said to King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are different than other peoples. They don't keep the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to allow them to remain. If it pleases the king, let it be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those.
I don't think we did chapter 2. Now here, let me explain what's going on here. Now this is going to be more difficult because for some reason it's not scrolling the text when he reads it like it used to when we did this. But let me explain what's going on so you don't just think I'm being a clown or mocking the Word of God or anything like that. On Purim, when the scroll of Esther is read, they read the whole book of Esther. It's 10 chapters. It doesn't take very long. Although this guy, for some reason, he reads slowly. But what you do when it's read is, I should point out, in the Torah, it says to not say the name. In English, it'll say not to mention the names of the enemies of God. It's more about invoking the names, but there's also a curse in the Bible, may his name and memory be blotted out forever. And so people will take pans to the synagogue or to wherever the scroll is going to be read. They bang the pans together when Haman's name is said. They cough like I did. It's to blot out the name. Noisemakers come from that. They were invented for Purim. It's kind of a raucous time. People dress in costumes generally. They put on plays and all of that, and it's almost like going to a wrestling event where you cheer the good guys and you boo the bad guys, or in this case you keep their names from being said. Now, because it's not showing us the text, it shows us the first page of the text when he reads it, but it's not showing us the whole text when he reads it. I'm not going to be able to do this very well, but what we're going to do is we're going to start over because I don't think we got chapter 2. So if you're not down with that, I understand. You can go on to other videos on this channel. But we're going to do it right. We're going to go back to chapter 1, which we did hear before, but we're going to hear them all in the right order. And then we're going to go to the Book of Esther trivia and see how we do. Right here on your favorite station. Your favorite channel, okay? Your favorite YouTube channel, the Poorly Aging, Sarcastic, PC, Witty Gamer channel. So let's try this over again.
Esther. Chapter 1.
Right.
Xerxes' royal feasts. Now it happened in the days of Ahasuerus.
Ahasuerus.
This is Ahasuerus, who reigned from India even to Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. That in those days, when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces, being before him. He displayed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days.
It took 180 days
When
to do
these
that.
days were fulfilled, the king made a 7-day feast for all the people who were present in Shushan the palace, both great and small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace.
Right.
There were hangings of white, green, and blue material,
Doesn't say green.
fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple to silver rings, and marble pillars. The couches were of gold and silver, on a pavement of red, white, yellow, and black marble. They gave them drinks in golden vessels of various kinds, including royal wine in abundance, according to the bounty of the king.
Right.
In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory, for so the king had instructed all the officials of his house, that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also Vashti the queen made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. Queen Vashti's refusal. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of Ahasuerus.
First of all, he's adding a few words. I don't know if he's reading a different version of it than he's supposed to, but we're going to have to start over again. I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to get it to follow the text. That's what it did before. Let's go back to the title screen for a minute. Let's see if he doesn't write with other versions of the Bible, because something is wrong here. Let's go to the American Standard Version. Let's see if he follows along this time. We're going to get this right, even if it kills you. Esther chapter 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This is the Ahasuerus who reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 107 and 20 provinces. Now this is worse. I don't know what's going on here. Start bark on launch. I don't know what start bark on launch means. Bark TTS. Click to change. So let's go back to the title screen. We're not tired. Now, I know he won't read us the King James Version. He doesn't read the Darby. So I guess he only reads the Word English Bible, but he gets some of the words wrong. That's weird. But let's get through this so that we're not doing this all night. All night long, all night.
Esther.
Yes?
Chapter 1.
Uh-huh.
Xerxes' royal feasts.
Who's Xerxes?
Now it happened in the days of Ahasuerus.
Ahasuerus.
This is Ahasuerus who reigned from India even to Ethiopia, over 127 provinces.
Yeah, right.
That in those days,
It doesn't say
when
that.
the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces, being before him. He displayed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days.
Right.
When these days were fulfilled, the king made a 7-day feast for all the people who were present in Shushan the palace, both great and small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were hangings of white, green, and blue material,
It doesn't say green.
fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple to silver rings, and marble pillars. The couches were of gold and silver, on a pavement of red, white, yellow, and black marble. They gave them drinks in golden vessels of various kinds, including royal wine in abundance, according to the bounty of the king. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory, for so the king had instructed all the officials of his house, that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also Vashti the queen made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. Queen Vashti's refusal. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the royal crown, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was beautiful. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by the eunuchs. Therefore the king was very angry, and his anger burned in him. Queen Vashti deposed. Then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for it was the king's custom to consult those who knew law and judgment.
Was it?
And the next to him were Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who saw the king's face, and sat first in the kingdom. What shall we do to the queen Vashti according to law, because she has not done the bidding of the king Ahasuerus by the eunuchs? Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen has not done wrong to just the king, but also to all the princes, and to all the people who are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen will become known to all women, causing them to show contempt for their husbands, when it is reported, King Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she didn't come. Today the princesses of Persia and Media, who have heard of the queen's deed, will tell all the king's princes. This will cause much contempt and wrath. If it please the king, let a royal commandment go from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it cannot be altered, that Vashti may never again come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate to another who is better than she, when the king's decree which he shall make is published throughout all his kingdom, for it is great. All the wives will give their husbands honor, both great and small. This advice pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan, for he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to its writing, and to every people in their language, that every man should rule his own house, speaking in the language of his own people.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do them in order now. He's reading slower than I did when I did the Purim service earlier tonight. But it doesn't take a long time to get through it. Because it's only shows the first page of the text on screen, I was confused about whether he had read chapter 2 before, but now I know he didn't. So we're going to go through every single chapter and then do the trivia at the end. Hopefully this is interesting to you.
Chapter 2.
Meditata.
Seeking Vashti's successor. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was pacified, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what was decreed against her. Then the king's servants who served him said, Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. Let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the beautiful young virgins to the citadel of Susa, to the women's house, to the custody of Hegai the king's eunuch, keeper of the women. Let cosmetics be given them, and let the maiden who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. The thing pleased the king.
I thought so.
And he did so.
Yeah.
There was a certain Jew in the citadel of Susa, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives, who had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. He brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The maiden was fair and beautiful, and when her father and mother were dead, Mordecai took her for his own daughter. Esther finds favor. So it happened, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together to the citadel of Susa, to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was taken into the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. The maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness from him. He quickly gave her cosmetics and her portions of food, and the 7 choice maidens who were to be given her out of the king's house. He moved her and her maidens to the best place in the women's house. Esther had not made known her people nor her relatives, because Mordecai had instructed her that she should not make it known. Mordecai walked every day in front of the court of the women's house to find out how Esther did and what would become of her. Each young woman's turn came to go in to King Ahasuerus after her purification for 12 months. For so were the days of their purification accomplished. 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet fragrances, and with preparations for beautifying women. The young woman then came to the king like this. Whatever she desired was given her to go with her out of the women's house to the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the next day she returned into the second women's house, to the custody of Shaashgaz, the king's eunuch, who kept the concubines. She came in to the king no more, unless the king delighted in her, and she was called by name. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, came to go in to the king, she required nothing but what Haggai, the king's eunuch, the keeper of the women, advised. Esther obtained favor in the sight of all those who looked at her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal house in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. Esther becomes queen. The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she obtained favor and kindness in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast for all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces, and gave gifts according to the king's bounty. When the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting in the king's gate. Esther had not yet made known her relatives nor her people, as Mordecai had commanded her. For Esther obeyed Mordecai, like she did when she was brought up by him. Mordecai uncovers a conspiracy. In those days, while Mordecai was sitting in the king's gate, 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, who were doorkeepers, were angry and sought to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. This thing became known to Mordecai, who informed Esther the queen, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. When this matter was investigated, it was found to be so. They were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence.
Okay, now we've gotten through the first 2. Again, this isn't working like it worked before. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong, or whether it's even me doing the wrong. But now we're going to chapter 3. Everybody keep track of which ones we've done, so that, I mean, we want to get through this. As much as we adore the Word of God, we don't need to do the same chapter 15 times.
Chapter 3. Haman plots against the Jews.
Metitata.
After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. All the king's servants who were in the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai didn't bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were in the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's commandment?" Now it came to pass, when they spoke daily to him, and he didn't listen to them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's reason would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai didn't bow down, nor pay him homage, Haman was full of wrath. But he scorned the thought of laying hands on Mordecai alone, for they had made known to him Mordecai's people. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even Mordecai's people. In the first month, which is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pure, that is, the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, and chose the 12th month, which is the month Adar. Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are different than other peoples. They don't keep the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to allow them to remain. If it pleases the king, let it be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who are in charge of the king's business.
That's 330
to bring it
tons.
into the king's treasuries." The king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. The king said to Haman, "The silver is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you." Then the king's scribes were called in on the first month, on the 13th day of the month, and all that Haman commanded was written to the king's satraps, and to the governors who were over every province, and to the princes of every people, to every province according to its writing, and to every people in their language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus, and it was sealed with the king's ring. Letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar,
Which is
and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the letter, that the decree should be given out in every province, was published to all the peoples, that they should be ready against that day. The couriers went forth in haste by the king's commandment, and the decree was given out in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. And remember, if I can't see the text because it's not on the screen, I can basically only react to the text that's on the screen. But we're making progress now. I hope you're understanding what's going on. So he offered 330 tons of silver to the king. I don't know where got 330 tons of silver, but that's the bribe he offered to King Ahasuerus to wipe out all the Jews. This is typical, by the way. A Jew does something somebody else doesn't like, and they don't just deal with that Jew, they deal with all the Jews they can possibly find. Let's go to chapter 4.
Chapter 4. Mordecai requests Esther's help. Now when Mordecai found out all that was done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and wailed loudly and bitterly. He came even before the king's gate, for no one is allowed inside the king's gate clothed with sackcloth.
Of course not.
In every province, wherever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Esther's maidens and her eunuchs came and told her this, and the queen was exceedingly grieved. She sent clothing to Mordecai to replace his sackcloth, but he didn't receive it. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and commanded him to go to Mordecai to find out what this was and why it was. So Hathach went out to Mordecai to the city square, which was before the king's gate. Mordecai told him of all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given out in Shushan to destroy them, to show it to Esther, and to declare it to her, and to urge her to go in to the king, to make supplication to him, and to make request before him for her people. Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message to Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that whoever, whether man or woman, comes to the king into the inner court without being called, there is one law for him, that he be put to death, except those to whom the king might hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. I have not been called to come in to the king these 30 days. They told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai asked them to return answer to Esther. Don't think to yourself that you will escape in the king's house, any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent now, then relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Who knows if you haven't come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther agrees to help the Jews. Then Esther asked them to answer Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are present in Shushan, and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast the same way. Then I will go in to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him.
That sounds very Jewish. And if I die, I die. By the way, I like that Mordecai, he rightly figures out that if Esther doesn't do what God has called her to do, God will raise up somebody else to do it, to keep the Jews alive. Jesus taught this as well when he was going into the city of Jerusalem the last time. Remember, they're laying down their jackets for him to walk on, and they're saying, Baruch haba b'shem Yahweh, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. And the Pharisees, they say to him, hey, tell your Talmidim to be quiet, your disciples. And Yeshua, Jesus, says, if they were to be quiet, God would raise up rocks to give me praise. So there's a concept in the Bible that if you're called to do something and you don't do it, God will raise up somebody else to do it. Now we're going to go to chapter 5. By the way, chapter 10 is really short. So by the time we're done with chapter 5, we're more than halfway through. Not that we're trying to rush this or anything. Definitely not.
Chapter 5. Esther plans a banquet. Now it happened on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal clothing and stood in the inner court of the king's house, next to the king's house. The king sat on his royal throne in the royal house, next to the entrance of the house. When the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther came near and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king asked her, "What would you like, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you, even to the half of the kingdom." Esther said, "If it seems good to the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, so that it may be done as Esther has said." So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. The king said to Esther at the banquet of wine, "What is your petition? It shall be granted you. What is your request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed." Then Esther answered and said, "My petition and my request is this. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I will prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said." Haman's plot against Mordecai. Then Haman went out that day, joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he didn't stand up or move for him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. There he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches, the multitude of his children, all the things in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman also said, "Yes, Esther the queen let no man come in with the king to the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. And tomorrow I am also invited by her, together with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate." Then Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends said to him, "Let a gallows be made, 50 cubits high, and in the morning speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on it. Then go in merrily with the king to the banquet." This pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made.
I think some interesting things here is, one, it says that told his wife about how many sons he had, which makes no sense. You'd think the wife would know how many sons had, even if she wasn't the only mother of them. In other words, if he was a polygamist and he had 4 wives, for instance, and maybe 12 kids by the 4 wives, you'd think she would still know how many sons he had, and she's still married to him. So that's an odd thing. I also want you to note that it is his friends that say, make a gallows 75 feet tall. That's important because, so it's their idea. Just so you understand, and we're going to get to the next thing really quickly, but just so you understand, the plot against the Jews was his idea. It wasn't King Ahasuerus. Now, King Ahasuerus, he was a weak man, and so he said to, write up a proclamation in the king's name and have it published abroad. In other words, make this a law and all that. But the law itself was written by, it was his idea. That's why later on in the book, you can see that Esther, had to tell King Ahasuerus what was in that proclamation, that law that wrote in the king's name. It was written in the king's name, but it wasn't written by the king. And so he didn't know what was in it, and so she had to tell him what was in it. And similarly, at his house, talking to his friends and his wife, when talks about Mordecai, woo! They come up with the idea. Have a gallows 75 feet tall prepared for Mordecai. Woo! So in this case, the gallows was the idea of the friends and the wife. It wasn't his particular idea to begin with anyway. So let's get to chapter 6 right here on your favorite YouTube channel.
Chapter 6.
Uh-huh.
Mordecai is honored.
He sure is.
On that night, the king couldn't sleep.
Oh, no.
He commanded the book of records of the Chronicles to be brought, and they were read to the king.
That'll put him to sleep.
It was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who were doorkeepers, who had tried to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. The king said, "What honor and dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?"
Woohoo!
Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Nothing has been done for him." The king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had come into the outer court of the king's house to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The king's servants said to him, "Behold, Haman stands in the court." The king said, "Let him come in." So Haman came in. The king said to him, "What shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor?" Now Haman said in his heart, "Who would the king delight to honor more than myself?" Haman said to the king, "For the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal clothing be brought, which the king uses to wear, and the horse that the king rides on, and on the head of which a crown royal is set. Let the clothing and the horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man whom the king delights to honor with them, and have him ride on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, 'Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor.'" Haman forced to honor Mordecai. Then the king said to Haman, "Hurry and take the clothing and the horse, as you have said, and do this for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that you have spoken." Then Haman took the clothing and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and had him ride through the city square, and proclaimed before him, "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." Mordecai came back to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning and having his head covered. Haman recounted to Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and Zeresh, his wife, said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but you will surely fall before him." While they were yet talking with him, the king's eunuchs came and hurried to bring Haman to the banquet that Esther had prepared.
Woohoo! Now you notice it was their idea, his friends, his wise men, his wife, have the gallows made. But now, in chapter 6, they're saying, well, if this guy Mordecai, woohoo, is a Jew, and you've begun to fall before him, it's going to continue, something like that. So now they're advising to uh, to not do these evil things against Mordecai. Woohoo! Which is the opposite of the counsel they had given him the previous day. So let's see what happens here. And by the way, again, this is not disrespect for the Word of God. When it's read in the synagogue, they make fun of the rabbi. This one day of the year, they make fun of the rabbi. They're wearing costumes. They're banging pans. It's riotous. In fact, in the Talmud, I'm told, and I don't remember seeing this in the Talmud, but in the Talmud it says that for Purim you are to get so drunk. So just so you understand, Orthodox Jews, Reformed Jews, well, not Reformed Jews so much, but Orthodox Jews, Conservative Jews, Hasidic Jews, people like that, because the Jews prevail in this book of the Bible, they party and they're meant to be decadent. Cheesecake was invented for this. You eat cheesecake on Purim at the right time, not when is feasting or anything like that, but at the right time. You drink wine, you eat cheesecake, you have bread. It's called a feast of bread somewhere in there. So you eat bread with leaven in it, by the way. Now, a month from now on Passover, we're going to eat bread without leaven, of course, unleavened bread, matzah. But this is the one time of the year where Jews feel they're commanded to eat bread with leaven in it. There's also a really weird tradition. I don't know it to be a lot. Oh, I forgot to tell you. So, because of all this decadence, you're supposed to get so much alcohol into you that you cannot tell Mordecai, woohoo, from that's supposedly really in the Talmud. It probably is. I mean, the Talmud's really, really long. And so even if you read it from cover to cover, which is thousands of pages, I think each Talmud is, I don't know, something like 6,000 pages long or something like that. There's the Babylonian Talmud and the Alexandrian Talmud. If you were to read it one time, even if you read it carefully and all of that, you're not going to retain all of that. So I don't remember if it's really in there, but every Purim I'm told that it's in there, so it's probably in there. That you're supposed to get so drunk you don't know the good guy from the bad guy. Literally, Mordecai, woohoo, from. There's even a tradition, and I'm sure this is not in the Talmud because these things didn't exist at the time when the Talmud was written. But there's a tradition of people smoking cigarettes as part of the decadence as well. Even people that don't smoke any other time of the year. And it's weird. I mean, you can go to synagogues, not Messianic ones, by the way. At Messianic synagogues, we do not get drunk, and we don't smoke cigarettes. But even 7-year-old boys will have a couple of cigarettes on Purim and no other day. So it's kind of a weird thing. It's very hard to explain to people that have never been in a shul, an Orthodox synagogue, or in a conservative synagogue. But anyway, we are getting through it. I could obviously lecture on the meaning of this book, but this is being made for my gaming channel. So what I'm doing is I'm having the narrator present the word to us, and then I'll take a test on what was read and see how I do.
Chapter 7. Esther pleads for her
Woohoo!
people. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen.
Woohoo!
The king said again to Esther on
Woo!
the second day at the banquet of wine, "What is your petition, Queen Esther?
Woohoo!
It shall be granted you. What is your request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed."
That's the half till
Then Esther
Jerusalem.
the queen answered,
Woo!
"If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondservants and bondmaids, I would have held my peace, although the adversary could not have compensated for the king's loss." Then King Ahasuerus said to Esther the queen,
Woohoo!
"Who is he, and where is he who dared presume in his heart to do so?" Esther said,
Woohoo!
"An adversary and an enemy, even this wicked Haman." Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. Haman is hanged.
Woohoo!
The king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen,
Woohoo!
for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman had fallen on the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, "Will he even assault the queen in front of me in the house?" As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs who were with the king, said, "Behold, the gallows, 50 cubits high, which Haman has made for Mordecai, who spoke good for the king,
Woo!
is standing at Haman's house." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified.
So a few things here. One of the reasons they do so much drinking on Purim, other than, to celebrate, to be joyous that God kept the Jewish people alive. I mean, when you think about it, there have been different times in history when people have tried to wipe out all the Jews. This is one of them. You have the Amalekites, by the way. The children of Israel come out of Egypt. They're unarmed. They've just been slaves. They come out of Egypt, and the Amalekites seek to destroy them all. And God delivers them. There's this case. Tried to have all the Jews killed. Not just the one Jew he was upset with. There were the Crusades. During the Crusades, it is well known, and by the way, historians have documented this really well, and Pope John Paul II documented this as well. He said that this was true. The armies marched across Europe to get to the Holy Land, and as they're going across Europe, when they come to a Jewish town, village, city, anything like that, they kill everybody there. Men, women, children. They loot the place. They burn the houses to the ground. Then, of course, there's Adolf Hitler, who killed more than 6 million Jews. The reason we say 6 million is because the Nazis kept really good records. So when we say 6 million Jews, we're talking about ones where we know the day they were born, their name, the day they died, all of that. There's 6 million Jews that died during World War II. The world calls it the Holocaust. Holocaust means burnt offering. Jews call it Shoah. So, by the way, about 11 million people died as the result of Adolf Hitler's activities. And so when I say 11 million, I'm talking about the 6 million Jews. Then the other ones that we don't have the records for, the other Jews we don't have the records for. The gypsies, the feminine homosexuals, the babies that Adolf Hitler had killed, both Jewish and non-Jewish. So if the Third Reich didn't think that you could contribute to the Reich, you were put to death. So that included sickly children. It included the elderly. There were priests and nuns, although not a majority, but there were priests and nuns that were put to death. Feminine homosexuals were put to death. They were seen as a threat to the macho, image of the SS. So let's see, gypsies, just pretty much anybody that Adolf Hitler and his regime thought as undesirable were put to death. And then, of course, you have all the people that died in the war itself, soldiers and all of that. It comes to around 11 million people. So these are 4 times. When there was a real threat, without God's intervention, Jews would be over with, done, wiped off the earth. I mean, have you met a Hittite lately? The Bible says the Hittites will be wiped out, the Amalekites will be wiped out. It says Israel will not be wiped out. Egypt will not be wiped out. Syria will not be wiped out. There's like 14 nations that are mentioned, I believe, in the book of Jeremiah, where it tells you which ones are going to survive into modern times and which ones will not. Guess what? It's 100% true. That's why you don't meet Philistines today or Amalekites. But you can meet an Israeli, you can meet Syrians, you can meet the Lebanese, Egyptians. All of those are still there. So you notice this is repeatedly what Esther sets up is a banquet of wine. And that's why alcohol is used so much in the celebration of God's intervention for the Jews. By the way, notice this book doesn't say directly that God did these things. That's understood by reading it. But it doesn't say God intervened or sent a prophet or anything like that. So now we're going to go to chapter 8.
Chapter 8.
Uh-huh.
Mordecai is advanced.
Woo!
On that day, King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, to Esther the queen.
Woohoo!
Mordecai
Woohoo!
came before the king, for Esther
Woohoo!
had told what he was to her. The king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai.
Woo!
Esther set Mordecai over
Woo!
the house of Haman. Esther spoke
Woohoo!
yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and begged him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out to Esther the golden
Woohoo!
scepter. So Esther arose
Woohoo!
and stood before the king. She said, "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that would come to my people? How can I endure to see the destruction of my relatives? Xerxes' decree. Then King Ahasuerus said to Esther the queen,
Woo-hoo!
and to Mordecai the Jew,
Woohoo!
See, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged on the gallows, because he laid his hand on the Jews. Write also to the Jews as it pleases you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may not be reversed by any man. Then the king's scribes were called at that time, in the 3rd month, Sivan, on the 23rd day of the month. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, and to the satraps, and the governors and princes of the provinces, which are from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, to every province according to its writing, and to every people in their language, and to the Jews in their writing and in their language. He wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by courier on horseback, riding on royal horses that were bred from swift steeds. In those letters the king granted the Jews who were in every city to gather themselves together, and to defend their life, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, their little ones and women, and to plunder their possessions, on one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar.
Which is today.
A copy of the letter, that the decree should be given out in every province, was published to all the peoples, that the Jews should be ready for that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the couriers who rode on royal horses went out, hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment. The decree was given out in the citadel of Susa. Mordecai went out of the presence of the king in royal clothing of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a robe of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and was glad. The Jews had light, gladness, joy, and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had gladness, joy, a feast, and a good day. Many from among the peoples of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews was fallen on them.
I want to make a few notes here. You notice the law is not written by the king. He tells Esther, woohoo, and Mordecai, woohoo, to write things in his name, just like he did with... I don't know if it's because the king himself is illiterate, which is possible. There were high illiteracy rates in ancient times, of course. I think the most literate nation that we know of was Israel, and in the 1st century, their literacy rate was something like 2.97% or something like that. So 97% of the people were illiterate, and sometimes that included royalty and all that. So I don't know if it's because he can't read. Now, you would think that even if he couldn't read, he could have his own advisors, write up the laws and everything. He doesn't do that. He has Esther, woo, and Mordecai, woo, write it up. And in their law, it says that the Jews can destroy anybody who comes against them at this particular time, which would be the 13th day of the month of Adar, which is today. And it says that they can plunder their enemies. That's very interesting. You can plunder your enemies because that's not what happens. They don't plunder the enemies. Another thing is the king says, "What is it you want, Queen Esther?" Woohoo! "Up to half the kingdom, I will give it to you." People have noticed that in the kingdom, Jerusalem was halfway. If you measure the kingdom, Jerusalem isn't the capital, of course. Shushan is the capital. But if you take the 127 provinces, Israel's in the halfway point. Jerusalem is at the halfway point. And so some speculate that when he says, "I will give you anything, even up to half my kingdom," that what he's saying to Esther, woo, is you can have anything you want, but I'm not gonna send the Jews back to the land of Israel. So that's something to think about. We're getting to the end of the story. Like I said, chapter 10 is very short. So now all the action that's left is going to take place in chapter 9. So if you're still with me, let's hear chapter 9.
Chapter 9. The Jews destroy their enemies. Now in the 12th month, which is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the month,
which is today,
when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, on the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to conquer them. But it turned out the opposite happened, that the Jews conquered those who hated them. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who wanted to harm them. No one could withstand them, because the fear of them had fallen on all the people. All the princes of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and those who did the king's business helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai had fallen on them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For the man Mordecai grew greater and greater. The Jews struck all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and with slaughter and destruction, and did what they wanted to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They killed Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Permashta, Arisai, Oridai, and Visatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Jews' enemy. But they didn't lay their hand on the plunder.
See?
On that day, the number of those who were slain in the citadel of Susa was brought before the king. Haman's sons hanged. The king said to Esther the queen,
Woo!
The Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in the citadel of Susa, including the 10 sons of Haman. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It shall be granted you. What is your further request? It shall be done. Then Esther said, If it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Shushan to do tomorrow also, according to this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. The king commanded this to be done. A decree was given out in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. The Jews who were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and killed 300 men in Shushan. But they didn't lay their hand on the spoil.
Told you.
The other Jews who were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together, defended their lives, had rest from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of those who hated them. But they didn't lay their hand on the plunder. This was done on the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of that month they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. The Feast of Purim instituted. But the Jews who were in Shushan assembled together on the 13th and on the 14th days of the month, and on the 15th day of that month they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages, who live in the unwalled towns, make the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, a good day, and a day of sending presents of food to one another. Mordecai wrote these things, and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both near and far, to enjoin them that they should keep the 14th and 15th days of the month Adar yearly, as the days in which the Jews had rest from their enemies, and the month which was turned to them from sorrow to gladness, and from mourning into a good day. And they should make them days of feasting and gladness, and of sending presents of food to one another, and gifts to the needy. The Jews accepted the custom that they had begun, as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is, the lot, to consume them, and to destroy them. But when this became known to the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he had devised against the Jews, should return on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore they called these days Purim, from the word pure. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and that which had come to them, the Jews established and imposed on themselves and on their descendants, and on all those who joined themselves to them, so that it should not fail, that they should keep these 2 days, according to what was written, and according to its appointed time, every year, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memory of them perish from their seed. Then Esther, the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. He sent letters to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their appointed times, as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had decreed, and as they had imposed upon themselves and their descendants, in the matter of the fastings and their cry. The commandment of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book.
Now, what's interesting here, first of all, the word pur means dice. So they threw dice to decide what day they were going to kill all the Jews. And so the days are called Purim, which would mean plural dice, more than one die. You notice the book follows kind of the same methodology as the kingdom. What I mean by that is when it is decided to establish the days of Purim, the king still doesn't write the command. He doesn't call in his advisors and write it up or anything like that. He has Mordecai, woohoo, and Esther, woohoo, do it. That's interesting. So, obviously, Yahweh is king. The Lord God is king. And the book doesn't say that the Lord God commands you to keep Purim. It does with some other holidays. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Pesach, which is the feast of trumpets, is Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. Pesach is Passover. All of these are commanded by God, as is the Sabbath, by the way. God himself commands the keeping of them. But now they're in a kingdom where they've been taken for breaking the covenant that God gave them. And in that kingdom, there is this king that has other people write up the laws. So following that kind of way of thinking, it kind of makes it look like this book is legitimate history, because the writer of this book seems to be doing the same thing that the king was doing. The king was having other people write the laws and everything that were could not be rescinded and all of that. And the writer of this book themselves doesn't have God decree the days of Purim, but has Esther, woohoo, and Mordecai, woohoo, declare these days, and ultimately Queen Esther commanding it. And it's still kept to this day. There's only a little bit left, just a few words in chapter 10. I know this because, like I said, I did a Purim service earlier today. And this is not a full Purim service. This is reading the text because of the day it is, and then taking the Esther test to see whether we remember what we learned. And I want to point that out too, before we get to the last few words of this book. Every holy day in the Bible is about telling the story, what Yahweh has done. Passover, we tell the story. We were slaves in Egypt. God brought us out. He used the 10 plagues. He parted the Red Sea. He kept us alive from the Amalekites who tried to wipe us out. It's telling the story. Every holy day in the Bible is about telling the story. So, we're telling the story here. And a tradition came up. I think it's post-Talmudic, if I remember correctly. But it got to a point where people were so used to hearing this story that sometimes they didn't tell it in a very compelling way. By the way, Hanukkah. We tell the Hanukkah story 8 nights in a row. And we try and make it different every night so that we don't bore the audience. So it's all about telling the story. And a tradition came up, which is still done by a lot of Jews, in that questions are asked at the end of the observance of the holy day to determine whether the people present heard and understood the story. And I think with Pesach it might have been pre-Talmudic, because there are Jewish laws that if you go through the whole Passover Seder, which back then, could take 8 hours. If you go through the whole Seder and the people don't understand about the bitter herbs, about being slaves in Egypt, about the 10 plagues, about all of that, you have to start the Seder all over again. By the way, tonight, if I fail this test on the Book of Esther, I'm not starting it all over again, probably. Certainly not with the whole reading and everything. This video is already long enough if it's even being shot at all. But I'm just saying that's how important telling the story is. Everything at Passover is to tell the story. The unleavened bread, the bitter herbs, the charoset. These are all used to help us remember the story better, to tell the story to one another, to live the story. That's why at Purim. Now, Purim's the holy day before Passover. So at Purim, we generally have the fast of Esther. You fast the day before the feast. We have the feast of Esther, which is called Purim. But before that, we have the fast of Esther. But then we have these things: cheesecake, cigarettes, if you follow that tradition, the wine, the bread, all of that, to live out this story as it's being read to you, to internalize the story, literally internalize it. Now, one other fascinating thing before we get to the last chapter, which is very short, in case anybody's still here. You have a month between Purim and Pesach. And that's there for a reason. It's where spring cleaning comes from, in fact. Once you're done celebrating Purim, you begin a month-long journey of getting out of Egypt. And you clean your house to get rid of all the hametz, the yeast. But you don't just look for, things with yeast in them and throw them out or something like that. Generally, you empty your refrigerators. Yeah, Jews generally have more than one refrigerator. You empty your refrigerators, you wash them down, you take apart the oven. Clean every part of it and put it back together. This is why there's 30 days for it. The holy days in the Bible have a period of time to prepare for them. So Rosh Hashanah. At Rosh Hashanah, they blow the shofar, the ram's horn, to wake us up and remind us that the Day of Atonement is coming 10 days later. So the month before Rosh Hashanah, you're supposed to be taking an inventory of your sins of the previous year so that they can be dealt with when you get to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Because the tradition is, when the Day of Atonement is over, you're written in the Book of Life or the Book of Death for the coming year. Meaning, you'll die if you're in the Book of Death, or get sick, or lose family members. You'll have great misfortune that's intentional because you're so wicked and because you haven't repented of the things you did in the previous year. If your name's written in the Book of Life, the idea is that you're going to have the opposite. You're going to be healthy, you're going to be prosperous, you're going to be happy, and all of that. So you have this month before Rosh Hashanah where you prepare for these very serious things to deal with sin. And before Pesach, you have this whole month to clean your house. And you do clean your house, and you get it ready for the Passover Seder. Don't get me wrong. You order the ingredients you need. You make the stuff. We make homemade horseradish, for instance. We get a horseradish root. We chop it up. We put the ingredients in it. We make them at home. The chasaret we make as well. Apples, wine, walnuts, honey. It makes a chasaret, which is supposed to be like the mortar being used building those cities in ancient Egypt. But even the cleaning the house, as necessary as it is a metaphor for cleaning your life. The Exodus, it really happened. When I say a metaphor, I'm not saying it didn't really happen. So the Exodus were freed from being slaves in Egypt. It happens that Jesus is executed during Passover. The Exodus, being free from slavery in Egypt, is a picture, even though it really happened, it's a picture of Jesus setting us free from sin. As much as the children of Israel went free, even more so we go free in Jesus Christ. Anyway, let's get to the last chapter. Then we're going to take the test and see that I totally fail at understanding anything, and nobody should listen to any of my lectures about the Book of Esther.
Chapter 10.
Good.
Tribute to Xerxes and Mordecai. King Ahasuerus laid a tribute on the land and on the islands of the sea, all the acts of his power and of his might, and the full account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him. Aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia?
How would I know?
For Mordecai the Jew was next to King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted by the multitude of his brothers, seeking the good of his people, and speaking peace to all his descendants.
I told you chapter 10 was short. But isn't there... Oh, there's the trivia. Okay, let's go to... Esther. Unlock. Let's see how we do. Begin. What plot did Mordecai uncover for Ahasuerus? An assassination. Why did suggest honors for Mordecai when the king asked what should be done for him? He thought the honors were his. Why did the government officials help the Jews on the day of the edict? They feared Mordecai. Who was made second only to the king at the end of Esther? Woohoo! That would be Mordecai. Woohoo! What happened to Queen Vashti after she refused to appear at Ahasuerus' banquet? She was banished. Why did convince Ahasuerus to kill all the Jews? It's because Mordecai would not bow down to Haman. What did it do when his plot was revealed and the king left the banquet? He begged Esther for his life. But it was an unfortunate situation because Ahasuerus saw him fall onto the couch where Esther was. And so he said, is he going to rape the queen right in front of me? What did the Jews leave behind on the day of the edict? All the plunder. Why did Esther hide her Jewish heritage from Ahasuerus? Mordecai told her. When Esther spoke to the king, he said he would grant any request from her up to what limit? Up to the borders of Jerusalem, also known as half the kingdom. Why did many people in the land become Jews? They feared them. More than halfway there now. What were the days of the edict called among the Jews so they could be remembered and celebrated and remembered? The days of Purim. Why could Esther not speak to the king about annihilation of the Jews? She had not been summoned. What was executed with? A pulley made for Mordecai. It was a gallows, not really a pulley. What other name was Esther known by? I don't know. Let's ask Hadassah. When the king returned to the banquet, what did he believe Haman was doing? Raping her. Literally is what it says. Some English versions water it down and say assaulted. What did Esther ask the Jews to do while she prepared to speak to the king? Do a fast, 3 days, 3 nights, no food, no water. Then I'll go in and see the king, and if I die, I die. What did Esther ask the king for on the day the Jews killed their enemies? Impale sons at a killing day. Oh no! I don't know what they think that answer was. I may have legitimately got it wrong. I don't know. Because they didn't explain the answer. By the way, what was the name of the eunuch charged with Esther and the other virgins of the harem? That was Haggai, however you pronounce it. When Esther spoke to the king, what did she ask for? That he and would come to dinner. Why was the king's second edict that the Jews could kill and plunder their attackers? The first edict could not be revoked. Total score 20 out of 21. And there you see the the Ark of the Covenant in the background. I don't know if I got that one question wrong or not. I may have. I may have misread it, I may have misunderstood it, or I might have legitimately got it wrong. It's possible for me to get things wrong, to make mistakes. Doesn't happen very often, but it's possible. So, I don't have a timer for the video I'm making right now. So I don't know how long it is, but I'm going to put an end to it right now. The purpose of this video was to present the Book of Esther as close to how it's presented in synagogues on Purim as possible. Now, if you wanted to be as close as you possibly could, you should have made fun of the one reading the scroll, which wouldn't be fun. We don't even know that narrator. So making fun of me probably would have been funner. They actually do that. They make fun of their rabbi in a good-natured way. You know, they don't nothing bad. So I am your poorly aging, sarcastic, PC, witty gamer. I hope you enjoyed this. If you do, giving it a thumbs up would get it in front of a lot more people. You can leave non-threatening, non-profane comments below. And certainly if you're not a member of our viewing audience right now through a subscription, you can go ahead and subscribe. That's free as well. All of those things and watching videos on the channel will actually help get the channel more well known. As you can imagine, since I play different kinds of PC games here, it's hard for the algorithm to figure out what I'm doing. That's why we don't have 10 million subscribers right now. And this is going to throw them for a loop because, you know, I played The Elder Scrolls Online earlier today. I was working on a football video. So putting up a Bible one is going to throw them for a loop. We're not trying to throw them for a loop. I'm just trying to show the vast variety of PC gaming. And I certainly care about the Bible. And so this seemed perfect for me. Now, I might post this. I'd have to look at YouTube's rules, but I think I could post this on my apologetics YouTube channel. Oh, I'm not supposed to mention that the poorly aged, sarcastic, PC, witty gamer is also Apologetics Unlimited again. So don't tell anybody, okay? But I have an apologetics channel on YouTube and Rumble. And I have a gaming channel on YouTube. So I could potentially post this to all three channels. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I know I'm going to post it to the gaming channel. I just don't know if I'm going to post it to the apologetics channel as well. But I am your poorly aging, sarcastic, PC, witty gamer. This is YouTube's poorly aging, sarcastic, PC, witty gamer channel, your favorite channel, and it's where you're falling in love in stereo.